Je veux vous dire que notre collaboration, l'Assemblée parlementaire de Conseil de l'Europe, techniciens de Odile, ils sont ici depuis 1 mois et demi. Ils ont observé tout ce qui se passe en Turquie. Bien sûr qu'à la base de notre déclaration, nous sommes obligés de tenir compte de résolutions de l'Assemblée parlementaire, du rapport de la Commission de Venise et aussi de la rapport préliminaire de février de ODIR. Et je crois que sur tous les aspects techniques et tous les chiffres et tout ce qui se passe avant le référendum, Madame Présidente de Zuleta, Mesdames, Messieurs, de présenter très bien et j'espère de convaincre tout le monde qu'est-ce qui se passe ici avant le référendum. Madame de Zuleta.
Thank you, Mr. Preda. It was indeed important to join forces with our colleagues from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in order to constitute together an international referendum observation mission. I would wish, first of all, to thank the authorities for their invitation to observe the referendum, and the Supreme Board of Elections and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for their cooperation and assistance. I also wish to express our appreciation to other state institutions, political parties, civil society organizations, and the representatives of the international community for their cooperation during our presence in the country. As has been indicated, our mandate on this occasion is to provide an assessment to determine whether the referendum process complied with OSCE commitments, Council of Europe standards, other international obligations and standards for democratic and electoral and referendum processes, and with national legislation. To this end, the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights has been here in Turkey since the 17th of March. Over the past month, our 24 long-term observers deployed across the country and our core team of 11 experts here in Ankara have been examining and observing the different aspects of the referendum process. We have been looking at the legal framework, the political and media environment in the country, the work of the referendum administration, the campaign, and the campaign coverage in the media. Our reporting on the media is an important part of our mandate. And to this end, we conducted qualitative and quantitative monitoring of the media since the 25th of March. Regarding the legal framework, we found that the legislation for referendums in Turkey is focused on elections and limited in terms of covering specific aspects of a referendum process. While we noted that the Supreme Board of Elections adopted regulations and instructions to address some aspects of the process, the legal framework still remained inadequate for the holding of a genuinely democratic referendum. In the campaign period, provincial governors used state of emergency powers to restrict freedom of assembly and expression, and emergency decrees that amended referendum-related legislation exceeded on 2 occasions the exigencies of the state of emergency. These were not subject to appeal. It is important to note the 18 amendments proposed changes to 72 articles of the Constitution, but were voted on as a single package, which is contrary to international good practice for referenda, because voters did not have the opportunity to make a choice about each of the distinct features featured in the amendments. None of the proposed amendments featured on the ballot or in the polling station, and there was no question on the ballot. Voters simply were asked to vote for yes or no. Further, the state took no steps to ensure that voters were provided with impartial information on the amendments and their impact, limiting voters' ability to make an informed choice. Regarding the referendum administration, as we noted, the technical aspects of the referendum were generally well administered by the 4 levels of electoral bodies. However, the work of the electoral boards lacked transparency. Board sessions were closed to the public and the observers, and only a limited number of Supreme Electoral Board decisions were published. We note that after the attempted coup in July 2016, 3 Supreme Electoral Board members and 221 lower-level election board chairpersons were replaced following their dismissals as judges. The political party representation on polling station committees was not fully balanced and was negatively affected by the rejection of over 170 chairpersons and party representatives nominated by opposition parties. Supreme Board of Election decisions are not subject to appeal, and the law does not guarantee effective redress. While the Supreme Board of Elections reviewed some 45 complaints in a timely manner, the hearings were closed and decisions were not published. The recent dismissals and suspensions of judges and prosecutors that continued during the referendum period had an impact on the independence of the judiciary. Regarding the voter registration process, we noted that in total more than 58 million voters were registered to vote in this referendum, including over 2.9 million abroad. Voters were able to verify their entries in the voter list and request changes. However, those who had to flee their residence in the provinces affected by security threats and ongoing security operations last year faced difficulties with their registration, and the International Referendum Observation Mission observers were informed that some of them were not able to vote. The law limits full participation in the referendum only to eligible political parties and does not provide for the involvement of other stakeholders, which is also contrary to good practice for referenda. The Supreme Election Board decided that civil society organizations and professional associations were not permitted to hold campaign events. We observed a restricted campaign framework. We also noted a significant imbalance in the campaign due, among other things, to the active involvement of the President, several leading national officials, and many local public officials in the Yes campaign. Our team observed the misuse of administrative resources and the obstruction of efforts by parties and civil society organizations supporting the No campaign. The campaign rhetoric was tarnished by some senior officials, equating No supporters with terrorist sympathizers. In numerous cases, No sympathizers faced police interventions and violent scuffles at their events. These events contravene OSCE commitments, Council of Europe standards, and other international obligations regarding freedom and equality in the campaign. Going back to the media, our monitoring showed that the Yes campaign dominated media coverage. The full figures will be obtainable in our final report, which will be published some 8 weeks after this preliminary statement. However, we noted that the legal framework for the referendum does not provide for impartial coverage of the campaign. It also does not guarantee eligible political parties equal access to public media and gives preferential treatment to the ruling party and the president in the allocation of free airtime. Further, for this referendum, the Supreme Election Board's authority to sanction for biased coverage was repealed. I would like to note that the passing of this emergency decree signaled indifference to OSCE commitments to upholding impartiality and equality of access as sanctioned by the Copenhagen Agreement of 1990. We noted that freedom of expression was further restricted under the state of emergency. The arrest of an unprecedented number of journalists and the surge of media outlet closures has led to widespread self-censorship in Turkey. Although we have enjoyed very good cooperation with all the authorities in the process, we note that the law does not provide for international observers or observers from non-partisan citizen organizations. This is contrary to the commitment Turkey has made as a participating state of the OSCE. The efforts of political parties to observe the process varied in different parts of the country, and civil society organizations significantly limited their support of observation efforts due, we were told, to fear of repercussions. On referendum day, the 60 members from 26 different countries of the International Referendum Observation Mission, whose conclusions we present today, visited a limited number of polling stations. We found that the process proceeded in an orderly and efficient manner overall. However, some OSCE observers and the other members of the International Referendum Observation Mission were impeded in their observation during opening and voting. Police presence was widely reported both in and outside polling stations, and in some cases police were checking voters' identification documents before granting access to the polls. The Supreme Election Board issued instructions late in the day that significantly changed the ballot validity criteria, undermining an important safeguard and contradicting the law. In conclusion, I would like to note that our statement includes a comprehensive overview of our observations, both positive and negative. On our part, the OSCE mission will be issuing a final report, as I mentioned, in approximately 8 weeks, including recommendations for the future improvement of referendum processes. Our mission will remain in the country until 22 April for the final stages of the process in order to report both on the final tabulation processes, the compilation of results, and complaints and appeals. Many thanks.
Thank you, Tana. As mentioned earlier, we now have time for questions from the media. I would ask you, if you do have a question, to please raise your hand, yes, and we'll have a microphone brought to you. Before asking your question, if you could please give us your name as well as the media outlet you represent. And as well, if your question is addressed to either Tana or Cesar in particular, please let us know that as well.
Teşekkürler. Türkçe olarak soracağım sorumu. Thank you. Sayın Zuleta ve Yıldız Yazıcıoğlu, Voice of America. Siz AGİT heyeti olarak ve Avrupa Konseyi heyeti, Birleşik Heyet olarak Türkiye'deki bu referandum sürecinin iptal edilecek derecede ihlaller içerdiğini düşünüyor musunuz? Muhalefetin belirttiği üzere çok yakın bir oy sonucu ortaya çıktığı için oy sonucunu etkileyecek bir ihlal söz konusu mudur? Teşekkürler.
Merci pour votre question. Nous avons déjà mentionné dans notre déclaration, la dernière phrase se réfère à qui se conteste l'opposition, mais ce n'est pas le temps de faire une analyse, une vraie analyse, une réelle analyse. Il y a des déclarations qui sont sans virgule, sans point de finale. Il y a des déclarations à chaud. Ce n'est pas notre compétence de dire quel est le niveau de fraude ou d'autres choses qui sont contestées de l'opposition. Nous, les représentants de l'Assemblée parlementaire, nous ne sommes pas ici pour juger quelque chose. Nous sommes pour observer qu'est-ce qui s'est passé. J'ai déjà fait 3 déclarations, que j'ai dit que la jour du référendum, il n'y a pas eu de problème majeur, sauf dans certaines régions, mais nous pouvons déjà regretter l'absence de l'observateur de la société civile dans le bureau de vote. Bien sûr, avec je peux compléter avec l'absence de l'institution internationale. Bien sûr que j'ai fait une autre déclaration que de manière générale, le référendum n'a pas correspondu aux normes du Conseil de l'Europe. Le cadre légal n'était pas adapté à la tenue d'un processus véritablement démocratique. Et en final, je dis, je crois que c'est très important, un état d'urgence ne devrait jamais servir à miner l'état de droit. Ça, ce sont 3 questions importantes pour nous, pour définir pourquoi nous sommes ici. Mais si vous voulez de faire des commentaires appliqués, je ne suis pas en mesure de répondre à l'allégation ou l'accusation des 2 parties. Merci.
Just to add that complaints that are tabled will be part of our report. We will assess the handling of these complaints as we have assessed the conduct of the campaign. This will be part of our final report. The International Referendum Observation Mission is not here to sanction or otherwise the referendum and to pronounce on its legality. We assess the referendum for its adherence to the international standards to which Turkey is party, and we report on this. We found that it fell short of full adherence, as Mr. Preda has reminded you, and we will make recommendations for improvements in the future. The decisions regarding the conduct of the elections regard the local judiciary.
Shabtai Gold from the German press agency. I wanted to ask if you think that given the media environment and what you spoke about, people having access to information, that the will of the people was fully expressed in an open and fair way in this referendum. And from your perspective, if people would have had more, if there would have been a freer media environment and more access to information, could that have changed the referendum?
In our assessment, our first point is that this was indeed an unlevel playing field, and this is in itself, this turning away from commitments to equality of access and impartiality, which are sanctioned by the Copenhagen Agreement of 1990, is one of the aspects of the shortcomings that we have pointed to in today's preliminary statement of findings and conclusions. what the outcome might have been would go well beyond our mandate. It's usually up to either the courts or history to judge.
J'ai déjà mentionné dans la première phrase de la déclaration cet aspect. Les deux parcs dans les campagnes n'ont pas le même équilibre. C'est clair que c'est débalancé. Il y a dans quelques paragraphes dans notre déclaration cette inégalité de présenter la campagne.
Soon after the High Election Board's decision with respect to the unstamped envelopes and voting papers, have you been in touch with the board, and what was the reply? How did they explain it to you? And are you satisfied by the explanations coming from the board, actually? Because despite the law had been adopted in 2010, the president of the High Election Board gives examples prior to that time, which are mainly going back to 2004 and 1996, 8, 4. Is it satisfactory for you?
We have drawn your attention to the fact that taking such a decision at that point in time in particular did undermine an important safeguard and was in contradiction with the law.
And how the board explained it to you? Are you satisfied with the reply?
We haven't had the opportunity to have a meeting on this matter, so we received the same information that you received from the press communique.
Rudav Televizyonu, Şevket Erkil. Benim sorum uluslararası gözlemcilerin çalışma koşullarına ilişkin olacak. Özellikle Kürtlerin yaşadığı iller ve Batı illerini mukayese ettiğinizde uluslararası gözlemcilerin çalışmalarında herhangi bir engellemeyle karşılaştınız mı? Özellikle Diyarbakır özelinde sormak istiyorum. Çünkü bununla ilgili çok fazla şikayet de vardı sosyal medyada. Uluslararası gözlemcilerin Kürt illerinde daha ciddi sıkıntılar yaşadığına yönelik sizin böyle bir tespitiniz var mı? Teşekkür ederim.
Monsieur, nous sommes ici 20, plus 2 qui sont le co-rapporteur. La Turquie, c'est un grand pays. Nous faisons une répartition équilibrée. On peut voir qu'est-ce que se passe au nord, qu'est-ce que se passe au ouest, à l'ouest et en sud. Il y a deux collègues qui se déplacent en sud et en sud-est. Et toutes les informations et toutes les questions qui sont passées ici hier sont déjà reflétées dans notre analyse et la déclaration. Bien sûr, pour ça, je dis qu'il y a des problèmes en certaines régions. Mais l'activité de tous les observateurs européens de notre organisation ne sont pas influencés du mot ou de l'autre sur leur activité. Ils disent tous, ils sont libres d'observer qu'est-ce qu'ils veulent. Ils peuvent entrer dans tous les bureaux de vote, dans tous les bureaux de vote. Ils peuvent faire une activité normale comme nous faisons d'habitude. Ça, c'est la réalité. C'est vrai, je reviens à la première phrase, nous sommes seulement 20. Parce que nous sommes ici, comme dit Madame Présidente Zuleta, dans un paragraphe en déclaration, à l'invitation de l'autorité turque. La Turquie, c'est membre de l'Assemblée parlementaire de la Conseil de l'Europe. C'est dans l'intérieur de l'Europe. Pour ça, nous acceptons de venir ici. Pourquoi la loi n'a prévu la présence de l'Observatoire international, je ne peux pas donner une réponse. Mais nous sommes ici. Mais nous sommes seulement 22. Et en fait, nous avons fait tout ce que se peut faire.
Hi, Mark Lowen, BBC News. One of the complaints of the... sorry. Are we waiting for him? Okay. Mark Lowen, BBC News. One of the complaints of the opposition was that the state news agency jumped the gun last night as the results were being tallied. And at one point there seemed to be quite a serious discrepancy between the State News Agency and Electoral Board. I wonder if you have any comments about the restricting of the handing out of the results, if you like, or the communication of the results by one news agency. And secondly, this is a tough one, I'm sure I'll get a no from you, but if you had to, given your experience of monitoring elections all over the world, I wonder whether you are able to somehow place this referendum on a kind of on a scale of how Turkey did.
Regarding the reporting of the results by the state news agency, we have inquired what their source was, because this was naturally of interest for our own reporting purposes, but we have not been able, we were not told. We know that parties conduct parallel counts, and parties are also informed. They have access to the results in real time. They can, through the electronic system of the Supreme Election Board, access the protocols published by all the individual polling stations, which are advertised. They are pinned up on the door. So that this should have been available to all the parties. It was not available to other actors, to our knowledge. There was a moment of the information flow was interrupted. You may have been aware the Supreme Election Board acknowledged there was 6 minutes interruption in the transmission of information. So we are still trying to put together the picture on how the results were acquired. On your second question, we don't compare elections, that is OCODIA does not compare elections, but there is quite a lot of material out there because the organization has observed 300 elections, and it's all online. You can see country by country, so you can track progress or otherwise. That is for the citizens to do on the basis of our individual reports, but we don't compare one election to another.
Je peux répondre rapidement. Pour la première question, bien sûr que la Commission électorale est souveraine. Qu'est-ce que annonce quelque agence de presse? À mon avis, c'est seulement propagande, c'est seulement action électorale. Et je peux répondre à la deuxième question de vous. Un seul mot, c'est difficile.
Thanks. I'm Onaran from Bloomberg News. I got two questions, one of which is probably a request for a bit of clarification on something that you may have already mentioned. Is voting folk in any way part of your mandate while you're assessing Turkey's adherence to all the international standards that you mentioned in those deals that it's a party to? And if so, was there any evidence of any possibility that there might be some fraud involvement in yesterday's vote? And my second question is, Mrs. Urieta, you kind of answered this question, but can you just clarify a bit more how exactly, because you said you're here to assess the referendum's adherence to international standards, but what is at stake for Turkish state, or for that matter any other state where you do observation? Like, how does your recommendations sort of filter through, I don't know, official decisions by whichever body it might be? a little bit on that. And one final request, please, Mr. Preda. There are not enough headsets in this room, and we just missed the entire speech in French. So if you can kindly provide an English answer, please, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
Regarding your question on fraud, well, indeed, POC commitments include respecting the will of the voters. The election has to respect the will of the voters. So naturally, an election which was demonstratively violates their will would not be in line with number one commitment, one might say. However, as you note, our report today, our preliminary statement of findings and conclusions, gives no examples of that because we were not able, if they existed, to report on them. And nor have we seen complaints to that effect. If during our presence in the country complaints to that effect materialize, we will attempt to assess them and we will report on them and also on their handling, the consequence. Regarding the consequences for a member state, actually we come at the invitation of member states. This is part of an OSCE commitment to invite the organization for electoral events in each of the member states, and we hand back our results to them, including recommendations. The OSCE has no enforcement powers, and it is up to the country and its citizens to implement these recommendations. Should they not do so, then on the next visit we point out that the recommendations have yet to be addressed.
Merci pour la question. C'est vrai, nous ne parlons pas de fraude, il y a une question. Je crois que c'est très important. Nous n'avons aucune information sur ce sujet. Ce sont des déclarations de partis, d'autres observateurs. Mais je veux dire une chose importante. Mon secrétaire général, M. Jagland, a fait une déclaration de presse. Et je crois que c'est une très importante déclaration de presse. Il a dit que les jeux sont faits, le référendum a été. Le rôle de l'autorité turque, et ici on peut parler sur le rôle de la commission électorale pour établir qu'est-ce qui se passe au niveau de l'égalité, de transparence, c'est le suivant mouvement de l'autorité turque. Ce n'est pas à notre droit, à notre responsabilité, qu'est-ce qui se passe dans le jour suivant. C'est clair, si toutes les autorités qui sont responsables d'analyser, de vérifier, de faire lumière à ce qui se passe hier, ça, c'est un pied très important avant pour la Turquie européenne. Pour nous, ça c'est inconnu aujourd'hui, monsieur. Si je veux parler en anglais, je parle en anglais, mais je veux parler en français. Il y a beaucoup de cas ici pour nous.
All right, I think we have time for 2 more questions this afternoon. So first here, and then afterwards we'll come to you.
Selva Ünal, Sabah gazetesi. My question is, why wasn't foreign media included in your report, since there was a high coverage by the foreign media with regard to the No campaign? Thank you.
We don't monitor the foreign media, like we don't monitor the vote abroad. We're not empowered to monitor overseas voting. It might be relevant, and the OSCE procedures may change in future. There may be the possibility of observing out-of-country voting. For the time being, it doesn't. The activities of the foreign media are usually in their own language. If the foreign company operates through a Turkish subsidiary in the Turkish language, it would be part of our observation.
Je peux dire que oui, nous sommes très attentifs à tout ce qui se passe, pas seulement avec les médias internationaux, mais aussi avec l'organisation non gouvernementale internationale. Mais qu'est-ce qui s'est passé avant le référendum? Tous nous savons. Il y a des documents, il y a des documents de la Commission de la Venise, il y a des documents qui sont très appliqués pour la Turquie, le rapport préliminaire. Dans le Conseil de l'Europe, dans l'Assemblée parlementaire du Conseil de l'Europe, la Turquie, c'est dans ce moment en monitorisation. Qu'est-ce qui se passe en avril? Tous nous sommes très attentifs parce que chaque session, chaque réunion à la commission de suivi à Strasbourg, la Turquie, c'est toujours le premier. Nous sommes très attentifs à ce qui s'est passé en Turquie, ce qui se passe en Turquie et ce qui va passer en Turquie. C'est vrai qu'il y a des informations variées, des informations de tout le monde parle. Par exemple, hier soir, vous avez 35 canaux de télévision. Je fais toujours le changement pour voir des informations différentes et aussi les médias internationaux. C'est vrai que ça, c'est pas à notre responsabilité. Madame la Présidente dit, il n'y a pas le moment d'analyser qu'est-ce qu'il dit, qu'est-ce qu'elle a dit la média internationale. Pour nous, c'est important qu'est-ce qu'a dit la média turque, parce que la média turque a influencé l'équilibre entre la campagne électorale d'une part. Merci.
Gökhan Elbek, TYN Medya. Benim iki sorum olacaktı. Birinci sorum, Yüksek Seçim Kurulu'nun seçim altyapısı olan seç liste sistemiyle ilgili olarak inceleme yapma şansınız oldu mu? Bugüne kadar herhangi bir muhalif bilişim uzmanı tarafından incelenmediği iddiaları vardı. Daha önceki seçimler için de geçerli tabii bu sorum. İkinci sorum da bir siyasi parti kurulmuş, Hayır Partisi, ama ismi bir türlü isminden dolayı İçişleri Bakanı tarafından onaylanmadı. Acaba raporunuzda bu değerlendirilecek mi?
I'll begin with your last question. The non-registration of an application by the no party is included in our report. Yeah. We address that. And also the appeals by two parties who were ruled not eligible to participate in the campaign. Of the 92 parties registered in Turkey, only 10 were allowed to participate in this referendum campaign. And civil society organizations were deemed ineligible. So on your first question about the electronic data transmission system of the Supreme Election Board, to our knowledge, this system is available to inspection by the non-voting members of the Supreme Election Board who are representatives of parties. They did not indicate otherwise to us so far. Should concerns on their part exist, they have the opportunity to bring them to our attention before we leave the country.
La rhétorique électorale et les méthodes électorales, ce sont différents. J'ai vu ici beaucoup de questions débalancées sur l'action, sur le matériau. À votre question, ça s'appelle non, et pour ça, il a été rejeté. Je ne sais pas qu'est-ce que je peux répondre. C'est la décision qui peut être attaquée. Je peux demander si cette décision a été attaquée, a été jugée. Je ne sais pas. Mais le dernier message que je veux vous transmettre, c'est que la Turquie, c'est un pays européen. Nous sommes ici pour ça. Nous sommes ici pour ça. L'Assemblée parlementaire du Conseil de l'Europe veut faire tout ce que ça peut faire pour l'avenir européen de la Turquie. Mais ça ne dépend pas de nous, seulement de nous. Ça dépend de l'action de la Turquie dans le temps suivant. Merci.
Right. Again, thank you for joining us here this afternoon. I'd just like to point out, on your way out of the room, you will find both the preliminary statement that we're presenting today, as well as the press release for this press conference, available both in English and in Turkish. Otherwise, I wish you all a wonderful afternoon.